I was under a flickering streetlight outside the ER in Denver, wrist in a plastic cast jacket soaked and heavy, asking my son for a couch like it was contraband. He said he was scrubbing in, said we'd talked about this, said boundaries like I was a line on a chart, instead of the woman who rocked him through fevers. I hung up, called my daughter at some promotion party where the laughter sounded expensive. She whispered about optics and the CFO and asked if this could wait until tomorrow. And I said sure, because apparently hunger and sleet can wait when optics are involved. You don't plan the slide. You know what I mean? You do everything right until the ground tilts, and there you are, gripping at air. I worked nights at a care home off Colfax for 11 years. Changed linens, learned which residents liked their apples peeled and which needed their pills tucked in pudding. The owners got caught siphoning money and the doors slammed shut. In a week, no severance, no pension, just a line at Human Services and another line for a cot that always went to someone younger or carrying a baby. My landlord sold the building to an investment group. My little Corolla went to the repo lot. And the worst part wasn't the cold or the empty stomach. It was this new talent I had for becoming invisible while standing right in front of people. I was limping toward the shelter when my phone lit up with a number that sounded like a marble lobby. Ms. Elaine Carter, this is Dana Cole from Harrow and Pike. We need to speak with you regarding Mrs. Eleanor Whitcomb's estate. Eleanor, the widow with the silver braid and the peppermint tin, the one who called me kiddo and asked about the chickadees at the feeder. I taped outside her window. She'd passed 2 winters ago with my hand in hers. And now a law firm was saying, please come in, we'll send a car. And I almost laughed, because nobody had ever sent a car for me in my life. Their conference room looked like money had a favorite color. Dana poured coffee that tasted like decisions and slid me an envelope with my name written so neatly it ironed the air. Eleanor's letter was plain and sharp. She wrote that I treated her like a person when her own children treated her like a project. She wrote that logic had guided her choice. Then, Dana said, the number like it was a normal thing. A person hears 155 million after taxes and court mess. And I held the saucer like it could steady the room. She added the part. Eleanor underlined twice, keep this quiet while you decide people change around numbers. And I nodded, because even the word decide made my ribs ache with a new kind of breathing. That night, in a hotel I'd only ever passed on buses, I stood under a rainfall shower until the water went cold. And the word boundaries finally slid off my shoulders and into the drain. I could have called my kids right then with a guess what I didn't. I tested first. I asked my youngest Leo to dinner at a place that smells like rosemary and money. He hugged me with that performative warmth people use when an audience is nearby, ordered a wine he pronounced like he'd practiced, and said he'd been thinking about me a lot, said he had a solution. A family in Hilltop needing a live-in aide for their father, room and board, and a salary. No shame in it. Mom, you're great with people. And I said, I'm not desperate anymore. He blinked like he'd lost his place on the script. Yeah, that happened. 2 days later, I sat on a cream sectional in Brandon's big brick house as he and his wife flanked me like security. Camille arrived in a cloud of perfume and apologies. I told them I'd inherited money, watched their faces do the math, then told them the number, silence thick as syrup. Brandon recovered first. Doctor voice set to urgent, said, this changes everything. We need a fiduciary security PR. We know people, Camille murmured about managing the narrative, and I felt the old ache of being turned into an optics problem instead of a person. So I told them my plan. I'm donating 100 million to shelters, food programs, elder support. I'm keeping 55, I'll be fine. Brandon choked on air, said rational people don't make rash decisions, said we should slow down, and I said, I've never been allowed to go fast in my life. Let me have this one. That's when I shared Eleanor's other gift. The test Donna had outlined it carefully. There's a separate fund, 6 million intended for your children. If they demonstrate genuine change over 90 days, not declarations, not hand-on-heart speeches, behavior. If they don't, the money goes to the same places you're funding. When I said those words in Brandon's living room, the air shifted like the truth opened a window. He went quiet, then colder, and by morning his friend at the hospital had called my lawyer about concerns for my judgment. Dana shut that down so cleanly, it squeaked, but the message landed. Control is the last language some people give up. Camille called, crying, said she'd cleared out her home office for me, said. Family first, said I wasn't being fair, which is code for, please forget the facts. And Leo sent a simple text. Can we talk without the money between us, which sounded decent, until you remember money arrived because the love didn't. We met at a diner on Federal with cracked booths and cinnamon toast that sticks to your bones. He didn't order wine, didn't hedge, he slid a folded check across the table like contraband. 15,000, everything I've got. I know you don't need it, I need to give it. Why now? I asked, and he said, because I finally get that. Love isn't the story you tell yourself, it's the receipt you can show for what it cost. I've been tipping 20% on guilt and calling it character. If you never forgive me, at least let me pay for one night. I wasn't there, he cried, the messy way, shoulders stuttering, and for once he didn't reach for a solution that didn't involve him. I deposited the check and sent every dollar to the shelter that let me in when my fingers went numb. Then texted him the receipt. This is what you did. He sent back a heart and silence, which sometimes is the most grown-up thing. And I realized maybe one of us had finally learned something. I signed the big papers in that glass box with the polite art initialed until my wrist ached under the cast. And then Dana slid one more envelope across the table. Eleanor's final move, a charter for the Whitcomb Dignity Trust, 25 million. Endowed founding director, named as me salary. Like a fantasy mission. Like a prayer with teeth housing transitions for families, home health, microgrants for seniors without advocates, legal navigation. When systems turn people into case numbers, and then the door opened and in walked Teresa Gutierrez. From my old night shift, the woman who smuggled in tamales and bought Mrs. Langley a blanket, with her own money. We hugged like the desert had found rain. Father Miguel from St. Jude's called an hour later about a partnership. I said say when, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like purpose was pulling me, instead of survival pushing me. 6 months later, we cut a ribbon on a converted school on the west side. News vans idled. The mayor tried to look like he'd always cared. But what mattered was the families walking in, the way their shoulders dropped, when someone said, welcome, and meant it. Teresa ran intake like a general with a hug. Father Miguel blessed the lobby bench because a mother had slept there her first night and called it the softest wood in Denver. My kids stood in the back row and I watched them without narrating. Brandon wiping tables at St. Jude's on Saturdays without posting about it. Camille reading to the center's kids after work and staying to stack chairs. Leo texting me every Tuesday with a simple you, good you, eating sometimes. That's the whole sermon. About the 6 million. Here's the clarity. I told them I wouldn't discuss it for 90 days. I would watch when the clock ran out. I sat at my little kitchen table and looked at 3 envelopes, and at the scale inside me some money went to people who earned it. Not because they were my children, because they acted like people who finally saw me. And the rest went right back into dignity with a capital D. People ask if I regret giving away 100 million, like the number is the moral. Here's my answer. Money is a map. It doesn't make you better. It gets you faster to who you already are. The night I said the number, my kids became amplified versions of themselves. The son who loves control tried to control me. The daughter who loves optics tried to brand me. The son who loves comfort offered me someone else's bed, then slowly, they became something else, not saints, just people learning to spend the expensive currency time and listening and showing up when it costs you, I became someone who doesn't apologize for boundaries. Someone who gives without letting people take, someone who knows the difference between being needed and being cherished, and chooses cherished, even if cherished is you and a clean apartment, and a key you hand to a mother at a desk, because no one ever handed you one. A few weeks ago, Brandon brought a neatly typed letter, said he wrote it for me, but really he wrote it for whoever he's trying to become. He talked about the week he was 8 with pneumonia and the plastic chair at St. Luke's. Said he finally asked himself, who held me when I got sick last year? Didn't like the answer, stood in my doorway, and said I would like to earn it back, not the money. Mom, I didn't say yes or no, I said, Tuesday is open if you want to wipe tables at the center. Wear shoes that can get dirty. He showed up, sent me a photo of scuffed sneakers later with, see you next week, maybe that's redemption. Maybe it's just penance, maybe it's both. So let me hand it to you now. If it were you, would you give away 100 million to find out who your family really is? Would you put conditions on love to save it from becoming a transaction? Would you take the clean road to respect? If it meant walking it alone for a while, tell me in the comments where you land. Right, wrong, too harsh, too soft. And if you've lived something like this, share it. Because stories like these don't end at a ribbon cutting. They end when we decide who we are, when nobody's keeping score.